Stone Circles Collective, welcome to Dying to Live.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So we have Bree, Amanda, Vanessa, Melissa, and myself. We are Stone Circles Collective, and we are an end-of-life doula collective here in Seattle, Washington. And I thought we could use today to educate people as to what the end-of-life doula role is and the service that we provide, and specifically our collective, the things that are important to us to provide and to give back to the community. And so I was hoping someone might start with maybe what is an end-of-life doula, death midwife, so many names, and going back to days of yore, kind of where this role originated, because I hear a lot of people talking about it as a new role, but we all know that it's been around forever. So who wants to take that one?
Well, I can speak to a little bit of like the history, I think, in terms of like, you know, death doulas. We hear a lot that, you know, this is a new and emerging role, but in my opinion, just from as somebody who works within, you know, the medical field, I think that the role of death doula has actually been around a lot longer than most people realize. I think it's just becoming more established as like a skill, right? That is, you know, that is now taught in like workshops. And I think eventually will be, you know, certified down the road in like probably a more official way in terms of like state regulation and stuff like that. It's not exactly regulated in that way right now, but I think it's moving towards that. However, you know, the history of like death doula-ing, if that's a word, I think, you know, is really tied to like hospice and palliative care, which we've had forever. And, you know, the first institutions to be the main providers of end-of-life care were actually religious institutions back in the 11th century. So that's where I really think like some of the beginnings of this idea of like providing people with end-of-life care came from. Obviously it's changed a lot since then, but you know, I think that the idea of being with somebody and providing them support in whatever way it may be, whether it's spiritual or support getting your, you know, your affairs in order, or just being a compassionate companion with somebody, has been around for a very long time.
I think that was thank you for the history education on the, I think the origin of hospice essentially. I do believe though that from an indigenous standpoint, I think that a doula was a midwife, and a midwife was there for every transition of the life. So I think that it was even before there was any type of institution that was created. You always had a tribe would always have some type of midwife or medicine woman or maestra rather, that would be there to support us through every transition in our life. So I kind of feel like that was taken away in many forms, specifically, in my opinion, killing of witches. I'm using air quotes since you can't see me, because a lot of the midwives were considered witches because they collected plants, right? And that was where some of them would get their power from. And really it would be to help heal others. And so I think it's in feminine identifying, and I would say not only feminine people, I think that anyone that has that desire to heal or to support, I don't really like the term heal, so I guess support would be a better term, but in my opinion, it's been innate in the women that I haven't encountered, or the female identifying people that I've encountered. For instance, in my lineage, my yaya was the medicine woman of our neighborhood. So I think it's just always been a part of our cultures, all of our cultures, and it has been stripped away when the medical industrial complex really started taking hold.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you brought that point up because I was a little vague when I said I think it's been around for a long time, at least in terms of when we talk about colonialism, which there's a lot of problems with that, right? There's documented occurrences of religious institutions, which are very colonized, taking that role, but it's been around well before that. It's just one of those things that has been, I think, swept under the rug or, taken over, by the colonialism that, we still see present today. And I think there's a lot of reclaiming of that going on right now, which I think is really powerful and important. So yeah, thank you for adding that on.
Yeah, I'm personally, fascinated by that role of support through all of our life changes and how that used to be ever present in communities and families, and how that has, slowly eroded away as women's power largely has been taken away, or female identifying folks, and how communities, as we've moved further and further apart from each other, that had a role in it as well as everything else that you noted previously. And so I love seeing all of this come back. And I think one of the things that we talk about a lot about the modern end of life support role is that with all of the restrictions and the insurance restrictions imposed on, say, hospice, right? The emotional caregiving, space holding parts of that role have also slowly eroded away. And thus the emergence of the end of life doula role certainly had a part in it as well. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that. Bree, do you want to take that one?
Absolutely. Yeah, the role of the doula is very important right now, not only in the holding space aspect, but also in our current times. There's a huge paradigm shift in the realm of death and dying, where people are starting to realize that they have more legal rights than they're led to believe, and they have more choices in dying, death, and disposition regarding themselves and their loved ones. It's been widely assumed for so long that you have to go through a funeral director, that you have to be embalmed and have these capitalistic patriarchal processes for the death of yourself or a loved one, unless you are of a certain religion that specifies otherwise. But the control and right and sovereignty that we have with death and dying is becoming more realized. And so home funerals, for example, absolutely legal. Green burials, there are many forms of disposition beyond just embalmed burial. There are ways that you can take things into your own hands with even building the casket, digging the grave, having your loved one at home to die and have the funeral. In many states, there is no need for a funeral director at all in any way, shape, or form. You can transport the body yourself. And the role for doulas is to not do all of that for families, but to be an advocate and an educator and a support system in going through that, and to help people know their rights and be there as a silent support grounding force as they take back what has been lost over the years.
I love that part of the role so much because, especially in this Western world space, we have been led to believe that we have to have all of these things in place when a loved one is dying and dies. All the things you mentioned, from involving a funeral director to very specific types of disposition to very specific ways of honoring that person when they die. And there's actually a million different things that can actually and legally be done. And so what an important role to have, to be able to open up those options for people, and especially when they're in the place of grief and, you know, not really able to do all that research themselves or digest it, you know, having a gentle hand to lead them is such a gift.
And when somebody is dying or someone they love is dying, there's a huge feeling of just a loss of control and a loss of power. And to know that you can uniquely cater the experience of dying, disposition, funeral, memorial, to honor yourself or the person that you're tending to, it brings back a sense of that control and a sense that not all is lost because you have it in you to heal and work through it together in a unique way that truly honors the essence of yourself or that person.
Beautifully said.
Right. It takes the individual, the way that, you know, the past 100 years that we believe that, I would say Western people believe that we should lay our dead to rest, has really taken the humanness and the individuality of that person out. And I really love what you said, Brie, of encouraging the sovereignty of the dying person or your loved one.
I mean, we just keep pushing death further and further and further away from us, so we have no familiarity level with it at all, and no, you know, dare I say, comfort level with it. And so then when it comes, it is so unfamiliar and such a shock, and such something so insurmountable because we just don't know it. And I think that can be applied too to like all the little deaths that we go through throughout our lives as well. And just this work is so important because the more we can talk about death and bring it back into the norm and realize that it is not only the thing that we all share as a commonality, but also something that's a natural part of life, through the way that we process through our own and our loved ones' deaths, I think it can only help improve life.
Yeah, I agree with that. Basically, I think by having a doula now coming more into the picture, it creates an opportunity for the beauty of death to take place. Because when it's been pushed away so far back, we have this disconnection where when someone's dying, we don't know what to say. When you don't know like what comes next. Like I've had clients that don't know and they're calling me saying, I don't know, what do I do next? So it's like there's this super disconnect with no guidance, and having doulas come in actually can be more of an illuminated process so that the client, the loved ones, have a guide to process them through this different time that they're not familiar with and that we've been disconnected from, that was natural before, because along the line many families used to support their loved ones, where you would have, you know, the family members or like a young person with their grandparent, but the dynamics through colonialism, capitalism, and have shifted everything so that we don't all live together. The family unit looks different, and that's okay, but how can we create chosen families to be together, or families to be together, and creating space for the dying and honoring them as their life was, and being there for them. So I think it's really important having the doula perspective or the doula come in, because this creates an awareness and a conversation like we're having now, that we can have it be more talked about and not have it be so taboo, because some people don't even want to talk about it because it brings up too much, or they're just afraid. And so allowing that, it's okay to be afraid, but just to know that we're supported and that we have this common thread through our lives that connects us. And this is like one of the most powerful trips that we'll go on, possibly. I mean, it's the end of our life, and it's interesting how people step away from it because they don't know what to do with it. And I don't think that's intentional. It's just that we haven't been brought up that way, possibly in some families or in some communities. And so it invites that back in, which I'm so glad that it's happening, and it seems to be on the rise. And I'm glad we're having this conversation now.
Oh my gosh. I love what you just said about the beauty of death. And I can feel an energetic gasp, because that is such a foreign concept right now.
Yeah.
And especially as, you know, we're in this time where there is so much death around us. And yet those of us who have supported people through their deaths, I think we would all probably say that we have experienced the beauty of that letting go in some form or function. And I don't know if anyone has a story they'd like to share about that, but it's a really beautiful concept.
Melissa, I really love the way that you phrase that, and especially I think, you know, as somebody who I've worked in hospitals and I've worked outside of hospitals, and the reason why I really feel inspired and hopeful about the sort of the progress that the death doula movement is happening right now is because, you know, there are a lot of limitations, right, to hospital care, you know, for a lot of different reasons that I'm not gonna unpack here, you know, for many things that are political, but also resources, you know. And I just think that it's so important to be with like your chosen family. There's limits in some areas where your chosen family might not be able to be with you in the hospital. I mean, that's just awful for me to think that happens, but it does. And so just this idea that you don't have to die in sort of this sterile setting. You know, everybody's situation is unique, and maybe some people need that kind of care, but not everybody does. And, you know, to be able to be surrounded by your chosen family, your loved ones, the people that you need in that time is so essential. And I'm very well aware that there are barriers to that in the medical field. And so I really like the way that you just painted that picture of, you know, having more control over who can be surrounding you during sort of the biggest journey that you'll go on in your life. I think it's really, really an important point.
Bree?
That's part of the way that we advocate as doulas as well. Many of us are certified in advanced care planning. So while we have this very ritualistic, spiritual essence to the way that we work, we are also very knowledgeable regarding the laws. Like, I'm certified in advanced care planning, also a notary public. So one thing that I really fight for is people's rights to have their chosen family with them at time of death or the time of an emergency. People don't realize that they can have their non-legally married partner with them at their deathbed or in the hospital, or those who are maybe estranged from their blood family and have fought so hard to find a family that they resonate with, people in magical communities, people in queer communities in particular, to have those people who really see them next to them when they need them most. And that's something that they absolutely have the right to, and we can walk them through claiming those rights.
That's a really important point. And, you know, what we kind of keep coming back to is there are so many more options than we're generally educated about. And that's one of the things I love about this role, is just opening up the possibilities for people in arguably one of the most important times of their lives.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
I love too, Vanessa, you hit on something with your earlier comments about, you know, some people do require being in a hospital or medical type setting, and some folks don't. And one of my favorite parts of this role is, regardless of where you are dying, you can design into what that looks like for yourself, with the help of a doula or another advocate, for the space and time when you're no longer conscious, but you haven't yet passed. You can write a death plan, much like a birth plan. Many people are familiar with what a birth plan is, but you can also do that for death, and you can decide who will be in the room with you. Who's in the room with you right now, Bree?
My cat.
Oh, I was hoping it was a spirit, actually.
Cat spirit.
Yeah, synonymous.
You can decide who's in the room with
She
you.
just took a flying leap out of the litter box, and it was a little startling.
She loves this topic.
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, keep talking, Kristen.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So you can, decide what sense you want around you, how you want to be touched or not. If you want to be read to, what kind of other sounds, music, and talking or not you'd like to have. You can even say, I would like a very calm, energetic space, and therefore I would like people to take a moment and do a visualization before they come in my room and leave all their shit from the day outside before they come in. You can get that specific about what that environment looks like for yourself, which also, to I think Bree's point earlier, allows you to have some control and some purpose in those last days when it's really important to have that.
And Kristen, can I ask, how would you, as you're putting that in the death plan, I think it's important for us to tell people how, if you are unconscious, for instance, how we would make sure that those wishes are kept to.
Yeah, I mean, that's when you move from kind of the compassionate companion to more of an advocate type role. And ideally, you would have the time to put all of this in writing and to share it with all the folks that are meaningful to you or might have a part in those last days with your doula before the time comes, so that you can have that conversation and educate them. And then I think Bree wants to add on.
Yeah, just a personal story with that. There was a man who I was working with at a hospice, and he went in dying of cancer, and that was his last stop, was that room. And when I told him about what I do, when I talked about death plans and the idea that he can create this space for himself and have the sovereignty over his last days and his disposition, it suddenly gave him something to look forward to, as strange as that sounds. Going from just laying there, this is my last stop, just waiting to die, suddenly he could plan for something and have something that he did have control over and that he could get excited about and that he could look forward to in a strange way. And it was really lovely to give him that gift of having those final days with something besides just waiting to die.
Having a say.
Yeah,
I don't think actually that's strange at all. I think having things to look forward to is very, very essential to our mental well-being, our mental and emotional well-being, and that goes throughout our life. And so I think that this is where having a death doula at the end of, your time on this realm is really important, because you need an advocate if you're sick. You're worried. Your biggest concern is about how your comfort is every day. That should be your only concern. And you really need somebody on your side, because there are going to be people out there who are going to not totally understand the laws. They're going to think that one thing, that it just goes one way. We have a long history of that happening. I think especially, within hospitals in the medical world, we have this history of sort of thinking that it is the word on how things should go, but that's not true. We're coming to find out that there are a lot of different ways that these things can be handled. And that's, I think, advocacy really is a powerful piece of care when you are providing support for somebody who is at the end of their life.
Absolutely. And maybe that kind of brings up a question that some folks might be having. I think I would if I were listening to this and maybe learning about this for the first time, which is, when can you bring on a doula? When is it most useful? And, when in the process? Does anyone want to take that one?
There are so many times in your life that you can bring on a doula, especially with this collective in particular, since we all work with grief processing. We do, like I said, advanced care planning. So advanced care planning can happen at any point in your life, and absolutely is encouraged to be taken care of when you're not on your deathbed, so that your affairs are in order. If you die suddenly and your affairs are not in order, that leaves a lot for the people who have to clean that mess up. If you have a diagnosis, bring in a doula. If you, at any point in the end of life process, and if you are suffering the loss of somebody and you feel like you need that support, bringing one of us in to help with grief processing, compassionate companioning on the other side. So there's not really no wrong time to bring in an end-of-life doula.
Yeah, agreed. And I just want to say, advanced care directives, whenever, as soon as you can. Honestly, I think, I've seen things go a lot of different ways. Life can be unpredictable, some people unfortunately pass away young, or accidents happen. There's just that unknown to being human and living in this world. And I think that having an advanced care directive is really important. Especially if you have specific needs, because you really need to have that in writing, especially if you end up in a hospital where there's a lot of checklists, and there's oftentimes legal things tied to people's stay there. And it's really important to have that document there to present to the care team who's there, so that they know how you wish to receive your care. But also, having a death doula that you're working with can be helpful in that regard too, because sometimes those wishes are not always honored, unfortunately, by professionals in hospitals, which is really unfortunate. And so having somebody on your side who understands what you want is also really important. But I would say, at bare minimum, having an advanced directive is like a very important thing to have, even when you're healthy and well, and have no worries about passing away young. I still think that it is an important thing to have set up.
Definitely.
I think too, we can be in support to the community, family, loved ones, whoever is surrounding the dying person as well. And so sometimes there may be instances when the person perhaps has already reached that state where they're no longer conscious, and the family or loved ones, community, friends, what have you, are needing a little bit of extra support. It can be really helpful in that time. Also, from an educational standpoint, since we don't really talk about death and we don't really understand what happens to the body as it dies, having someone there who is emotionally detached, who can tell the family the things that are happening are normal, this is part of the process, and kind of outline that and reduce some fear and anxiety in that regard, is also really helpful.
Definitely. Circling back to advanced care directives, something to consider too is like, it's good to do it at any time. And like we were saying, especially when you're not going through the end of life, when you have time now, and to keep that in consideration of like, things change. So, who we want there might change. They may pass away themselves and not be supported for us. So just to revisit that, just like if you were going to have a medication change or eyeglasses change every couple of years, you do the same thing with your advanced care directive. Like, visit it and see if there's anything that's changed in your life, so that as you age or as time goes on or whatever, that you can go back to that and like make some adjustments, because things change in our lives. So it's something that to revisit occasionally.
Yeah, that's a great point. And make sure that somebody knows where it is. Or multiple
people.
Yeah.
Your doula.
For the reasons. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I love that, Melissa, revisiting it every year. Like, for example, you need new eyeglasses, tying it onto a habit that you already do in regards to your body and your health. We get annual exams every year. You know, we have women's health exams, we have eye exams, you know, we do, you know, people do those things, maybe sometimes not always super religiously, and that's okay, but you know, they are things that we revisit, and I think our advanced care directives should be revisited in that same way.
But you make an annual checkup with your doctor, make one with your doula too.
Exactly.
I love it.
Yeah.
You could even do it all on the same day and have that be your
You
self-care planning day.
That's right. Yeah.
There you go. You got to throw a massage in there or something too.
Yeah.
And you can,
you know, go ahead. Sorry.
You could make it fun too. It doesn't have to be, you know, it can be something that is inspiring. You know, like one thing I've been meaning to do is create a beautiful box. That's my when I die box, so that, you know, my person that's assigned for my advance directive, the main person will receive that, and inside there can be gifts or notes, love notes or whatever, and those can be distributed to other people. So you can plan this ahead, and it doesn't have to be daunting work. You can create creativity and add some elegance, or however you show up in the world, put it into something like that. It can be beautiful and not something to be like, oh, this is very morbid, you know. It's like, it can be, you know, I find morbidity beautiful as well. So like, you can create that, and like whatever it is for you, but to create that beauty into your process and have it be revisited on occasion.
What a beautiful way to honor yourself, and also in those creative acts, others, and really lean into the things that you, let's say you are creating letters or a playlist or a recipe book or whatever it is that you're putting into your box for the people that you love. What a wonderful way to really lean into your gratitude and your love for these folks while you're still living. It's a way to deepen that. And this type of work is one of my favorite things. It has what I think is a really horrible name, because it's called legacy work. And how many of us think that we have a legacy to leave? It's like a really stressful word, right? And I think it keeps people a lot of times from wanting to do those projects, but it really just means, what would I want to leave behind for somebody to read, to listen to do after I'm gone? Yeah.
I like the term life review a little bit better than legacy, because I definitely don't have a legacy. But I think it is what I was liking about Melissa, how you're talking about, like, I really like to craft. I've always liked to craft. So it's a great way of starting early, so that if for some reason you did get in a car accident or something like that, you'd still be able to leave that box for your loved ones. But what I also like about it is we've talked a lot about advanced care directives, but some more of the practical side of what doulas do, and spirituality. But I have quite a few friends who are interested in working with a doula, but are atheists. And so I think it's important to recognize that not everyone that we're working with is going to want that ritual or spirituality support. But the emotional support is really, I think, where a doula can come in and support. What I like about it is that we are taught how to read what the other person needs. And so to meet them where they're at, instead of coming in with our assumptions or what we would like to see for them. So really being very very aware of where they're coming from, what their culture is, what their sexual orientation is, anything that would make them who they are. So just their personality too. And so keeping in mind that we're also really able to support people who have no spiritual connection. And that is totally fine as well, because we're able to do the things like Melissa was talking about. Writing a note is not spiritual, it is very emotional.
Mm-hmm.
I spoke with Kristen recently about life review ideas, and they absolutely don't have to be spiritual and can very much identify with the person who is leaving it behind. Like a couple things that we were talking about is like a recipe book or a mixtape. Imagine if at your memorial everyone was given a mixtape of all your favorite songs or things that really identify with you. And you can get so creative. It does not have to be this formal, stiff situation where everybody's just sitting and crying while a preacher speaks. There's so much that can be done to really just capture the essence of who that person was.
Mm.
And I love what you're saying, and part of this is also bringing a little bit of ritual back to the process. What has become a very sterile process, and certainly not everyone's going to want that, and we'll meet them where they're at. But for the folks that do, I think it's important that ritual can happen in the smallest of ways, in the most unexpected of ways. And Bree, I don't know if you want to share. You recently created a little ritual for a death that you helped doula, and although the setting wasn't what you expected it to be, it was still really meaningful for people, and you were able to offer them a way to honor the person where they were at the time.
Right. Yeah. So this one in particular, there was a lot of rituals involved with this, but it was a witness cremation. And so with that, it's a big industrial machine, and it's not the most ritualistic setting. However, I work a lot with herbs and oils and different things of that nature, and there are specific herbs that for many, many years have been tied to energies. So the people who were there, it was mostly his wife and his children and his children's partners. And for each of them, I gave them each an herb: lavender for peace, rosemary for remembrance, mugwort for spiritual connection, parsley for safe journeys in the afterworld, rose for love. There's so many ways that you can bring that into that. So they were able to say goodbye to his body one last time, and each of them put their herb and their blessing on his chest, and his wife anointed him with oil, and together we sent him into the cremation chamber. And it's something that a lot of people don't even realize you can do a witness cremation. And that is another way that we can advocate and educate of these are your choices, and you can ask for this even if it's not openly advertised that it's an option. And some people take a lot of comfort in being the last person with the body before disposition, and whether that be internment through burial or aquamation or recomposition, there's a lot of options now. This could be a very long podcast if we went in depth. But his wife afterwards was so grateful, and she just looked at me and she said, "This is how it should be done." And it gave her a lot of healing in that process.
Thank you for sharing that. Well, maybe with the time that we have left, if we all want to go through and maybe share like one more thing that we think is really important for people to know about either their end of life choices or Stone Circles or the services and support that death doulas can provide, that might be a great place to leave people today. And maybe I'll go first. So I think the thing that I would, want folks to know is that death is big, death can be scary. It doesn't have to be. And there are people to support you. The ways that you can find a death doula in your area is simply to Google end of life doula, end of life midwife in your local area. You could also go to, there's a national organization called INELDA that does a lot of education. It's one resource for education. Many of us have experienced their training program, and they have a death doula directory, as do many other organizations that many folks are probably unfamiliar with. So it's easier to find us than you think. And the probably best way to choose an end of life doula is to reach out and have a conversation and see if there's a personality fit and kind of go from there.
I also wanted to, I love what you're saying, Kristen, on how to find us. And I think it's also important to recognize that we're able to support on remotely too.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely is more of the humanistic side, to be able to be there and hold the hand of the dying person or their chosen people. But especially in these times when people are still dying alone, we are able to support remotely, and that can look like, I know Bree did an online funeral about 2 months ago. And so just keeping in mind that we are able to support, even if it's just having someone to talk to on the phone, of freaking out of, do I pick cremation for them or burial? I don't know what they wanted. They didn't write it down. What do I do? Right? Just having someone there who isn't part of your family, because as we know, that can be probably sometimes the most difficult aspect of it, is trying to navigate your family members, whether or not they're blood relatives, but arguing over what the maybe say that they're dead already, that the person would want. And so having an unbiased party there to support and just bounce ideas off of and give advice on, well, this is what I've seen before, knowing the person or knowing you, this is probably what they would like to do, and there is no wrong answer on this. I think that peace of mind is really what doulas are able to offer, because I've heard several times of like, well, I didn't know what they want. I don't want to make the wrong decision. And that in itself is something that people live with for the rest of their life, if they feel like they've made the wrong decision. And I think a doula is there to really help you make those decisions.
Absolutely.
I'd agree with that. A lot of the work that I've done thus far, I have assisted with end of life, but I get a lot of questions. So I'd say, if you know of a doula, or if you have a friend that's like, I know somebody that's a death doula or end of life doula, and you have questions, just reach out, or like we're saying, type in Google and find one in your area, or go to these sites. And one thing to think about, like if you go to our website, stonecirclescollective.org, we have an event page. And so we're going to be having more dialogues. We have one coming up on October 1st. I'm not sure when this airs, if it'll be then, but we'll have that coming forward. So you can be in these conversations. You're invited to come. It's open to the public. We encourage anybody that's curious, wherever you are, or maybe you have someone in your life that's, transitioning and you have questions. So yes, please check out our website, stonecirclescollective.org, and look at our site, ask us questions, check out an event. And there's also death cafes that are a great place to meet up with other people and ask these questions as well.
I mean, there's one guarantee about folks in the death space. We love to talk about it. So it's a very safe, comfortable space to have conversations.
Very
and
true.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's such an undiscussed topic. We're very focused. I can only speak to particularly American culture, but we're very focused on youth and youth. And, I think that the spotlight that gets shown on that makes the process of death even more frightening for a lot of folks. And so, it doesn't have to be that way. I guess I don't know if I have anything new to say, but just that, the way things have been set up, at least in America, it isn't the only way. There's a lot more options out there, despite what other people might tell you in whatever setting you're in. And so I'm happy that we're talking about this to let other people know that you have other alternatives besides passing away in a hospital, besides having your body shown in, a formal setting that is not your home. There are other options for you. And some of them might be more cost efficient too. It's very expensive to pass away as well. So, please reach out to us, reach out to other death doulas if you know them in your life. I think it's really important that we're all having this conversation together.
Yeah. So if there was one thing to share today, just the fact that there are options and that we can help point you toward them, I think is definitely the most important.
Yeah, that's exactly my final point, is that education is key. There is so much fear around death because it is the unknown. And the more that we put it into light, the options into the light, the advocacy and the DIY aspect of it, it can be so scary, the thought of having a dead person in your home, but just a few moments in and it's somebody who you love and you've spent your time with. It is so healing and psychologically and spiritually healthy. Proven psychological studies that taking care of your own dead and spending time with the dead bodies is really helpful in the acceptance and healing from that.
Yeah, it lessens the grief process as well.
Right. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you all for being willing to come on and have this discussion. I'm so glad, Melissa, that you mentioned our website, stonecirclescollective.org. We are always a resource, and if we can't be a resource for some reason, we will point you in the direction of someone that can, for sure. We're all about sharing the love of this space.
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. We're all on the same side.